Normal's city manager told 25 News last week that Uptown Station is not a homeless shelter or a shelter alternative, but town staff is noticing when the front of the building is blocked in the early morning with suitcases from people who were there all night. Taylor Fleming now at Town Council, where they approved a new code of conduct. Taylor?
Tyler, the Normal Town Council voted to change the code of conduct for Uptown Station. Town staff say that there's a problem with people, including homeless people, staying too long at the train station and blocking entrances or exits. They also see people with too many belongings. Violators will be verbally warned first, and police could give ordinance violations. If authorities determine the behavior is especially bad or a continuing problem, people could be banned from the part of the building where they committed a violation. Public commenters said they don't want to see homeless people lose one of the only places they can go if they're not in a shelter. Several were from social services like Home Sweet Home Ministries and the Salvation Army.
This revised code of conduct is not in the best interest of our unhoused community members and neighbors. Living on the streets is the last option people have when they have tried to stay with family and friends or find a bed at a shelter. We cannot deprive the unhoused of one of the few places they have to go to feel some sense of security.
The item started on the omnibus agenda for routine items before being removed by Karen Smith. Kathleen Lorenz made a motion to table this that failed. Ultimately, the changes passed 5-2, with Lorenz and Rory Roberge voting no. There's an exception to this ordinance when the station is used as a warming or cooling center during emergencies.